Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you jumping on the show, listening wherever you're dialing in from. Dialing. That's funny. That's a funny term. I haven't said that on the show at this point. So today we've got the privilege to have a really great conversation with Paden Squires. Paden's in the tax and wealth planning business. I'll let him kind of give us his kind of quick intro on what they do, and we'll talk through some more of that as the conversation goes on. So, Paden, over to you, sir. Give him an introduction.
Yeah, Jeff, man, I appreciate you having me on your podcast. I appreciate that you're, building a cool platform and sharing stories like this. I'm Paden Squires. I'm located in the central Missouri area. I'm a longtime CPA, also CFP. I have my own tax firm, Squires Tax Planning, it's about 11 years old now. And yeah, me and my team, we work really heavily in the tax, really the tax planning space. So not just preparation, but really planning, as in working with entrepreneurs and walking alongside them and helping them proactively strategize and move things around and do things as smart as possible to honestly will pay less in income taxes so they can grow their net worth.
Right. No, yeah, definitely. The tax planning thing is, I think most people do not put enough thought into that. And I think it's something that, from a business owner or entrepreneur standpoint, more people need to pay more attention to it, I think, because, to your point, I mean, I think there are definitely some strategies to help with a lot of that and to get you to a better place. So,
Yeah, yeah. You know what I would say there? It's just like there's a big hole in the market. If you know anything about general CPA firms, they're very compliance and tax preparation focused. So they're really good at filing tax returns. And that's great. But there's often very little to zero actually strategizing going on there, working with the business owner and, throughout the year of what can we do about this? Not just, hey, we want to file your taxes right, of course, right? But what can we actually do about it?
what do you think is the number one most beneficial strategy that people are using right now that you guys are kind of pointing people to and that you've seen other people use?
There's a lot of low hanging fruit, and one that's super easy. And I never want to use the word always or never or whatever, but like generally, every business owner, and once again, I just said every, but generally, business owners, anybody that has a business, can do what's called the Augusta Rule. It's a thing in the tax code that any person in the United States can rent out their personal residence for up to 14 days a year, and you don't have to pay income taxes on it. So there's a strategy of having your business have legitimate business meetings in your personal residence. You document that the business pays you rent, and ultimately you don't have to pay income taxes on it. And that fits most businesses' situation. And the thing is, 98% of businesses don't even do it. And because CPAs and different tax preparers, they have zero processes around that, right? How do you implement it? How do you document it? How do you make sure, like, if you were to be audited, that there wouldn't be any issues, right? And so I've had a lot of clients over the years that have like, oh, I've approached my CPA about that. And they're like, well, yeah, you can do it, but it's only worth like 5 grand. And you really want to do all that stuff for 5 grand and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, well, that's because you haven't made a process to make it easy. If you make a process to make it easy, well, that 5 grand becomes a lot more attractive.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think some of that's going to depend on the market too, right? So it's based on the median rate of like rentals around you and some of those kind of things, right?
Yeah, we end up, ultimately for clients, we end up doing some, we're looking at Airbnbs and, we're pulling comps to find a reasonable rental rate.
Yeah.
Of course, we're trying to justify as high as rate as we can,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but like generally you want that to be as high as possible. And yeah, so it really depends on your personal situation. But even when that be the case, I mean, you're at least probably going to make at least 5 grand disappear off your tax return, in like 5K of income not get taxed at minimum.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. What role does technology play in how you're serving your clients today versus say 5, 10 years ago? What do you think the biggest differences
Oh
are?
man, massive, massive. I'm in a very traditional industry and filled with people that are just personality types that are tilted that way, right?
Yep.
Conservative, more analytical, all these things that personality types that, typically accountants are, right? You can throw like
Right.
engineers, that type of personality, right?
Yeah.
So they're generally slow adopters. And also that's, another reason why the industry just kind of sucks and customer service sucks and whatever. But technology's played a huge role, especially in the last 24 months with, obviously AI has been a massive thing we've implemented across all of our platforms, getting into a legitimate CRM system. We personally use HubSpot, and of course inside of HubSpot you can do all kinds of things. But
Right.
what's really amazing about that is the technology we've been using In the old days, when I say the old days, I don't know, 2 years ago, that's the old days now. It's like I would have a meeting, like, okay, I'm sitting down here with Jeff. I'm talking about his situation. Well, somebody has to take all these notes, right? Like,
Right.
and for me, like, I'm a relational guy and whatever. I'm a terrible note taker. And like, for a long time, all this stuff was just stored in my head.
Right.
And so now the technology is amazing to where it's like I can sit down with, like you, Jeff, and I have my AI note taker on the call and it takes immaculate notes. And I don't have to quote remember anything,
Right.
right? Like I can go back and look at all these notes and know exactly, okay, I need to help this guy solve this problem. And here's all the information I need because he told me in that call. And I'm not reaching back out to Jeff and be like, what'd you say you were doing there? I can't remember,
Yeah.
yada, yada, yada. And so what's awesome is that note taker, say it's on this call here, it's got your email address, it knows it's Jeff. As soon as we get off that call, those notes get transcribed and throw directly into Jeff's contact,
Yeah.
inside my CRM system. The awesome thing is my CRM also has AI just layered in it. Like I can pull up Jeff's contact record and it's going to immediately just create a little paragraph up in the right corner of like, okay, what's going on in this situation? It'll be
Yeah.
like, okay, Paden emailed Jeff 2 days ago and it was about this. And it's just this immediate little paragraph up in the
Yeah.
top corner. And then, of course, you can just query it about anything too. You're like, how much did Jeff say he was going to sell that real estate for?
Right.
It's right out.
Yeah, and then
Right.
it
So it's like,
pops up in the note side. Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. So you're never like just scrambling looking for information. I don't have to go back to the clients and ask them something they've already told me before.
Right.
It just makes everything smoother and it allows us to really build a process where, obviously with that CRM system, and we've really worked super hard with technology building SOPs and processes that to where, communication doesn't fall through the cracks, right? And
Yeah.
we try to, mistakes still happen, but like we build a system to where it's like somebody just has to not follow the system for some people through the cracks,
Right.
right?
Right.
And even then, Jeff, like, I think I was telling you the other day where it's like now we've even taken those SOPs and uploaded those into our kind of AI space that we've made that me and all my team members are on. And by being able to upload, we have very detailed SOPs of like you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. And you can upload those to your AI, and then everybody in your team has the ability to just ask your AI system, like, what's the next step in the process? What do I do after this? What do I do
Yeah.
after this? And it's all right there.
No, it totally makes sense. And like at that point, like you're starting to like duplicate not only yourself, but your team and like the processes that you built and all of those kind of things. And that totally makes sense because I think in the long run, to your point, I think it's going to save you a lot of time because you're not having to go jump on a call, like you said, and try and get in touch with the client and say, okay, what was the thing that you were talking about? Like to your point, like it's all in that memory. You can go back to their contact information and then you can find that, and see what's going on with it and, make decisions very quickly at that point. I think would just save a huge amount of time there. I know cybersecurity is a huge concern for a lot of different businesses now. I mean, there's insurance for cybersecurity now. There are a lot of other things that people are doing on the cyber side. You're dealing with, some sensitive information from a financial standpoint with people and those kind of things. What platforms are you using or what technologies are you using to kind of keep people's information safe as you're kind of going through the normal course of business? What platforms are you guys using for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I of course have my tax firm, also I have the wealth firm as well. And as being, we're not the smallest people in the world. We're not the biggest, but like, being a mid-size, financial company, obviously you probably got a pretty big target on your back, right?
Yeah.
My knowledge in this space about the cybersecurity space, like personally, is very little. What I use is some very high quality IT system, right? Or
Right.
IT, company, right? And
Right.
outsourcing kind of stuff. It's all the same. It's all the same stuff. And the scary thing is, you bring up cybersecurity, and it's not like okay, a matter of if this is ever going to happen. It's probably when. When this happens, you need to do X, Y, and Z because it's in today's world, like stuff gets exposed literally all the time, and all of our social security numbers, I'm sure, are on the internet somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And,
They're
and
they're
it happens to companies all the time where like they don't even tell anybody all
they've
this
got a
stuff
data
was
breach or something.
exposed.
Yeah.
For me, like as an entrepreneur, it's something that I know very little about, and I know that I need to know enough to go hire experts in that area.
No, I totally get that. And I think what you're highlighting there is I think what most people sometimes don't think about. And it's the like to your point, if you don't have the expertise, then find somebody that does, that can help you with that, right? And get those things squared away. So essentially, you're bringing in a technology partner, to help you with those things, to make sure that you guys are, in a good space.
Yeah, and we pay a lot of money a month to do that
Right.
because we know, I mean, we know how important it is. And, the last thing we ever want to do is something that damages our clients anyway.
Yeah, no, totally get that. I think for the listener, but, what you highlighted, I think is a crucial thing. I mean, I think people need to think about more about that. I think they need to think more about planning further ahead of time, but also at the same time, like finding the partners that are going to, benefit them from the standpoint of whether it's a digital security piece or whether it's, just whatever it is that they're working in, finding a partner that can help you with things that you're lacking, right? Or the things that you need help with, right?
It's not like, hey, hey, I don't know anything about this. I'm going to just whole cloth turn this over to
Right,
somebody,
right,
right?
right.
Because ultimately it's your responsibility. You're the owner. And it's knowing enough.
Yeah,
And I tell a lot of my clients this. I was like, you don't need to know all this stuff. Like, I will explain anything to you want to
yeah,
know. But, like, we build trust, know that I have your best intentions, right? And my plans. And it's like, hey, I'll explain any of this to you.
yeah.
But, like, here's the highlights. And most entrepreneurs are like, sounds great. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like, let's
Yeah.
agree,
No. I mean, I
that kind of
think
thing.
that's one of the things I think that I have always appreciated about Dave Ramsey's approach to some of the things that he does. And he always tells people, like, you need to go find a team, and you need to find a team that are going to teach you the things that you need to know. Like, to your point, like, there's a certain amount of this information that you need to know yourself as an individual because it is your responsibility as a business owner. But at the same time, like, you need to find somebody that will teach you the things that you need to know and get you to a better place, with some of that information. So,
Yeah, I mean, I see business owners do it all the time in their financial space where it's like, "Hey, I'm not a finance guy, so I'm just gonna turn all this over whole cloth," and that usually really turns out bad.
yeah, it
You
doesn't it
can't be
doesn't
the
end well.
business owner and just be totally ignorant of finances.
Yeah.
That's just not gonna work.
No, it does not end well, at that point. So, no, I
That
totally get
usually
that.
ends in embezzlement or yada yada or something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of open doors at that point because you don't
Yep.
know enough to check the doors, right?
You
Yeah.
need to know enough that you're, like, getting a good deal, I
Yeah.
guess you know what I mean? Like, you need to know enough that this is a proper solution, even though I
Yeah.
don't know all the details.
Yeah. I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't know exactly how everything functions, but I do know based off of, whatever learning you've done or whatever, reading or research or those kind of things that you've done, like, yes, this will do what we need it to do. This will function. And it's a reasonable fair cost, for that situation. So, we talk a lot on the show about the intersection of content, technology, and physical space. For us, that kind of goes in relation to from the content side, like what is the message that you're trying to get out to people? What are you trying to put in front of people? And how are you trying to communicate that, whether it's clients, employees, or just the world in general via social media, those kind of things. From a content and social media standpoint, how has social media influenced the way that you build trust and credibility with potential clients?
Yeah, that's huge. That's something I never really took serious until I would say calendar year 2023, January 2023 is when I really started taking social media serious. I used it kind of passively as a tool, just my personal thing. And I built some authority and kind of influence, just kind of running my personal stuff. But it was really in 23 where, I got, I would say, professionalized in those areas and brought on a team that really helps me in my world, the money world, it's all about trust and relationships. And, I really see, the content we put out. We put out a lot of content, even as my firm puts out content, that's really tax and wealth focused. I put out a lot of content and that's really, with the podcast and other posts and stuff I do. And that's really, mindset, entrepreneur type content and those things meld really well together because in the services I offer, entrepreneurs are the people I want to work with anyway, and have the situations that I can naturally add a lot of value to.
Right.
So I see my social media stuff as branding, not really like marketing tactics, because we do other things that are like marketing tactics, right? Where we're trying to consistently generate leads and
Yeah.
through different avenues. But the branding there all just supports it, right?
Yeah.
And the branding, what it does is it legitimizes, it's like, okay, here's this random guy on the internet that's, asking if I want to do some tax planning. Well, that's Googling, right?
Yeah.
Obviously people are going to go check you out on the internet. And then of course they see me and they see, I got so much content out there. Hopefully they see, okay, this is not some scammy sales guy or
Yeah. It's
whatever,
not a fly
and
by night situation or,
yeah, you can get to know me too, right? You can
yeah.
get to know me very well through my content if you consume But so it really like the branding, I use the social media as branding to really support, the day-to-day marketing of trying to draw in leads, right? And by far, I sound a lot smarter at this than I actually am. Like I'm very new in this, and there's still a lot of stuff I'm figuring out in that of trying to, in my mind, even early in years of my business, never even thought about like, okay, how do I consistently get leads and what, as like whatever fell in my lap, and that's
Yeah.
what it was. But once again, you want to go to the next level. It's like, okay, I'm going to get professional, and that's what I've done a lot of.
Yeah, and I think a portion of that, I mean, we talked a bit about it just a few minutes ago about finding other people that can come alongside you and help you in those things, right? Who, like, your expertise may not be like building content or telling stories or, posting to social media, but like you find people who can help you with those things. And like
Yeah.
you may have an idea or a thought around, hey, this is what we could do or this is what we should do, but hey, here's what this actually looks like. And yeah, can you share like an example of a piece of the content that you guys have done that really resonated with people that ended up
Mm.
bringing clients through the door, or whether it was a podcast episode or like piece of content that
Yeah.
just kind of took off? Do you have an example of what you guys used for that and what the story behind that was?
Yeah, I mean, for us, a lot, and we're in the process of creating a whole lot more of these. No joke, my team had a call like 2 hours ago specifically on this of trying to create ideas around this, but case studies.
Yeah.
Mine, it's giving proof of like, okay, here's an example of a client, and here's what we did, and here's the results, right? And just being able to clearly lay out the value that some of these clients are getting when they're coming to work with us, right?
Yeah.
We did one, I don't know, a few months back that I think hit really well because it explained the situation. It explained like, I came into a business where there were multiple partners. I ended up only really working with one of the partners. The other partners ended up working with another kind of strategist person. They ended up paying way more for the other strategist person.
Yeah.
And long story short, we got dramatically better results.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing where like case studies of like, okay, I came into this situation, we tweak this, tweak that, and they have $30,000 less in tax, right? And being able to, even just from a marketing standpoint, being able to tell several different stories of several different types of people, right? That
Yeah.
may relate to different potential leads of like, oh, well, okay, that's a great story. They can do that for them. They can probably do something for me, right?
Yeah.
And so we really are going to double down on case studies, right? And sharing those stories of just, I mean, real results we've got.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. We've looked at case studies as well for what we do from a technology standpoint and tried to focus on that, doing, more of like the before afters, which for us is probably a little more difficult. Do you see the content that you guys are doing as a way to more broadly educate the public, or do you see it as a way to get down to kind of like your ideal client, to kind of sift through the people that you want to work with and people that you want to come through the door? Like, or do you feel like it's kind of a little of both at that point?
Both. That was going to be my answer
Yeah.
before you gave me that option.
Yeah.
It's both. I got into podcasting really, and as corny or as cliche as it sounds, I didn't have an end game there or really even a strategy. It was just like, I like doing this. I think this would be really cool. I'm sure it would be helpful for business. So I'm going to do it. And, doing the podcast is my favorite thing I do. I love in conversations. I love coming on shows like
Yeah.
yours, Jeff, too, having conversations like this. There is a lot of altruistic, just, hey, this stuff has helped me a lot. It can
Yeah.
probably help you, and just naturally, I'm not a sales guy at all in that kind of way. So it's very much, I'm like, just here's what I do and here's results we've gotten. If you're interested in that, happy to talk to you about it. Right?
Right.
The whole point of my podcast, is to share stories so other people don't have to like make the same mistakes. Hopefully they can skip, two or three stages that I had to go through or one of my guests had to go through
Yeah.
or whatever. And ultimately too is like there's some beginning entrepreneurs that listen to that show. And of course, there's a lot of developed entrepreneurs, but like there's some nurturing aspect to that as well. Of
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe not ready for me and my team at this point, but if we're providing them value for a long time, and a need comes up, guess who they're probably going to call?
I mean, at some point, sooner or later, I mean, those conversations are bound to happen, right? I mean, so especially if you're providing them, a decent set of content and principles that you guys are using and things to your point that
Mhm.
you're thinking, okay, this might help you, that might help you. here's maybe where you are in your journey from a, tax planning standpoint or a wealth planning standpoint,
Mhm.
any of those kind of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, and because, our planning model doesn't necessarily work for everybody, right? You're starting out entrepreneur, of course, there's value we can add, but it may not be the best fit, and it's just nurturing. I'm happy to even get on calls with people and just straight up tell them that, right? And, not that I can't definitely help them and give them some advice, but it's not probably gonna be a great fit for our model, and I'll be like, "Hey, maybe we can do a little bit of work together, but let's grow you to a certain point, and then let's get you on board."
Right. It's funny because I had some conversations with a few different people about a couple of people in the information space that are doing some big things and, that kind of stuff. And one of the things that kind of came up in some of those conversations was sometimes, depending on the information that you're giving to somebody, if they are not at the point where they are ready to receive it, it can potentially become a much bigger issue because you wouldn't give somebody with a $100 million business the same strategy as somebody with $1 million business because it doesn't work, right? There's a lot to be said about growing to the point where you can sustain, whether it's building additional business and, going from, 5 million to 10 million and 10 million to 20 million and, those kind of things. It's a different set of skills at each of
Yeah.
those intervals requires a lot of you, as an individual, as a business owner, all of those kind of things. There's just a lot more I think that people don't really think about with some of that.
As an accountant, Jeff, like, I see that, right? You can almost look at the revenue of business and tell you in like what industry they're in and probably have a really good idea what they're struggling with. Almost from that alone, right? Of like, you're stuck at 3 million, you're in this industry, like say you're in the construction industry, you probably have no systems. You probably aren't really making any profit. And it's like each level just has a new set of problems,
Yeah.
right? They're actually pretty consistent
Yeah.
because everybody runs into the same walls.
Do you see that broken out by a range? So somebody that's in the, 1 million to 3 million mark, you see a recurring problem set with them. And then the people that are in the 5 million to 10 million mark, like they're at a totally different problem set and there's things that they're missing.
You've probably heard some of these, in the past yourself, but it's, like the first million is really just no one knows who you are, right? It's just hustle. And you can hustle and glue things together to get a million in revenue in a lot of different industries, really without building, much of what I would call an actual business.
Yeah. Create a high paying job for yourself, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'll hate it, but you'll be making so much
Yeah.
money. I believe me, I had one of those for like 6 or 7 years. But then, then you get to 1 to 3 million. It's usually okay. You're starting to figure out some systems and maybe some consistent lead sources. Usually the 3 million tops out of like, okay, now you actually need to get real leadership.
Yeah.
You as the owner needs to be the leader. You need other, almost C-suite type
Yeah.
leaders around you. That usually breaks you past, the 3 to 5, maybe even up to 10.
Yeah.
And my expertise really probably stops at like 20 million. Not that I don't have clients bigger than that,
Right.
but
Right.
like,
Right.
I'm really like, I really know the 1 to 20, pretty well.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It's interesting because, like, thinking through that, I mean, I know in my own experience, like, owning a business and, building it to a certain point. I mean, I think I got to the $4 or $5 million revenue, top line revenue point, and I'm running around and like my hair's on fire and I'm trying to figure out like how do I deal with any of this? And then it's like, oh yeah, you need to bring in other people, to kind of pick
Yeah.
up the slack and pick up the weight and pick up some of these other things so that you're not having to remember and think about like every single thing that happens.
Yeah,
And
you don't have
you know,
enough time to solve all those
yeah,
different problems. You could work yourself to death and solve a lot of it, but like that's not.
it's not sustainable. And
Yeah, it's not sustainable. You're not really solving the problem.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
you're
the
not.
problems are only going to get bigger if you just
Yeah.
keep solving them with yourself, right?
Yeah, you're not solving it. You're just putting a band-aid on it, basically powering through and grinding through. And I mean, I think there is a season where you do need to grind because without some of that,
Mhm.
you're not going to have the growth to do the things that you need to
Yeah.
do, right? Like you're not going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
build the muscle
Often you
memory.
do got, you hit some plateau where it's just like, oh crap. I need to hire somebody, but I don't really have the money for it. Right.
Yeah.
In those seasons where you hit those different plateaus, at the $1 million mark or 3 million or 5 million, those are generally where they're at.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, you probably do need to you either got to invest the money in the business and just hire the person,
Yeah.
or okay, you got to be willing to, work overtime, right, for a period of time to
Yeah.
generate that additional revenue so the business can just pay for the person. Right? That's your choice, right? It's either put some money in and invest in that next person, or you're going to have to earn it through some extra work so you can get to the point where the business
Yeah.
actually.
This is more of a finance question than it is anything else. But like for you guys specifically, percentage wise, how much money from a profit standpoint are you guys reinvesting into the business, every year right
Mhm.
now? Are you guys, putting in,
Yeah.
10, 20, 50%? I mean, what does that look like for you guys right now?
I'm lucky to be in I say lucky, there's pros and cons for every different type of business, but I'm in professional services. So like really like I don't have much overhead.
Yeah.
There's no cost of goods sold. It's salaries,
Yeah.
salaries and software,
Yeah.
right? And that's really it. And, a well-run, business at my model, the type of model I do should be at 50 to 60% net margin,
Yeah.
a very well-ran one. Now, are we there right now? No, because I've been trying to figure things out and I'm the kind of guy that's like, I want to do it now. So I'll throw money at stuff until until something sticks and you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I solve that problem. Personally in 2025, yeah, my net margins aren't near that because once again, I'm ready to throw the money in there. It's like, okay, let's just solve this problem as
Yeah.
quick as we can so we can just move on to the next thing.
I'm just curious from that
Yeah.
standpoint, because I know, like, for us, from a company standpoint, like, just about everything, like, we've reinvested in the business, we've reinvested in people, additional resources, like focusing on growth, some of those kind of things. So it's always
Hmm.
interesting to have that conversation with other business owners, who are in,
Yeah.
a similar situation, right? That you're like, we're in the same
Yeah.
thing. Like, we're trying to figure out all the systems and get all the right people in the right places and do all the right things. And at that point, it's like you're kind of going along and figuring those things out. So I totally understand that. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think your answer is probably indicative of a lot of people that are in that same kind of place that we are, right, as
It,
business owners.
I would just add to that is just like I was kind of telling you some of my personal situation before we got on here. My family and I are making a couple moves on the personal side
Yeah.
to honestly, it's not that we need to, but for a lot of reasons, just kind of downsizing our lifestyle, just realizing a lot of those things don't really give us that much value and how much power that'll give you in business too.
Well, yeah,
Of
absolutely.
having a very low, personal lifestyle and the ability to re-up and go all in. If you don't need anything from the business, you just got a lot more tools to play with, a lot more capital to multiply that thing faster.
Yeah. No, totally get that. Totally get that. Looking ahead, what technologies and content strategies do you think are going to make a bigger difference for folks that are in your line of business? Are there things that you
Yeah.
feel like are going to come along and be game changers in that environment?
Well, there was what OB3, the one big beautiful bill, came down signed into law on July 4th. Well, I don't know what I call it a game changer, but there's certainly a whole lot new in the tax world right now that a lot of people, I'm still consuming a lot of it, trying to understand, the thousands of little changes they made. Overarching the tax code didn't change, like I would say dramatically, but there's a whole lot of little planning opportunities inside of that
Yeah.
that still like almost nobody's an expert on at this point. But I think what's really, in my industry specific, and it's probably not just my industry specific, but all business is like you need to think about the customer experience. And I think that in my industry, particularly, I think the bar is set. I mean, you can just step over the bar. It's insanely low, and I don't know how many
I,
stories I have.
yeah.
There's like, I don't know, I've emailed accountant 5 times. He doesn't even respond to me or I call him
Yeah.
and he never
It's
calls me
That
back.
stuff is so common, man. It's like you hear
Yeah.
people say that. I can't even remember how many people I've heard talk about the bar
Yeah.
being so low. But man, as we started to kind of look into some of that and, go through some of those deals, like I'm right there with you. It's like you email somebody and you need something done, like you have a project, you have money, you're going to do this thing, you're going to spend this money. And like you email, you call, and you cannot get anybody to get back in touch with you. I'm like,
Yep.
man, this is crazy. Here's a perfect example, real world, perfect example. We had some issues at the house not too long ago. We had squirrels and rats in our attic. We start hearing stuff in the walls, and we're like, oh, this is not good. We need to get this situated. So we ended up I called 4 different exterminators, and I only got one to call me back within 30 minutes. The rest of
Yep.
them were 2 or 3 days later. And I was like,
Yep.
they finally called back and I was like, guys, I already got somebody. Like, and it's like, you guys called me back like 2 days later. Like, I mean, this just doesn't even
Mhm.
make any sense. The company that called me back within 30 minutes, they were out there the same day,
Yeah.
working on getting stuff squared away. And I totally agree with you on that. I think the customer experience, I think not nearly enough businesses are focusing on that for whatever reason, whether they've kind of gotten to a point where they're comfortable and they just don't really care, or who knows what the deal is there, but
Yeah, and maybe it's just my perception. It's just like it seemed to just absolutely collapse even more after COVID. Customer service, like, who cares about customer service? And part of that was worker shortages and yada yada. But real world example, I had an issue with my truck, and I've called twice and left voicemails, and nobody. And it's just amazing. It's some of that's culture in your business, right? If you're the first one to answer and just respond to somebody in today's world, like you can almost like charge whatever you want because I'm like, yeah, I guess you're my only option. Let's do this.
well,
You know,
especially in
and
situations like that where it's like an immediate need, right? Like
yeah,
like in the plumbing world, in the electrical world, in the exterminator world, like if somebody has an immediate need, if they don't know somebody or haven't, had conversations with somebody or haven't found somebody on next door and they're reaching out to you and you're taking, a day or two to get back with them, that's a huge, huge issue,
yeah.
right?
It's like, okay, we'll just let the squirrels run around there for a little
Exactly.
longer.
Yeah, it's like I'm gonna go to sleep tonight and I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and there's gonna be a squirrel on my pillow. It's like I don't. This is not a world I want to live in. Like, how can we solve this as fast as possible? Like,
Yeah.
it's that whole scene, the meme that everybody shows with the guy with his credit card. Like, take my money. Like, here's my
Yeah.
card.
And like, what's the whole point of marketing, right? They're trying to be in front of the customer like at the time of need. That's the point of systems,
Yeah,
right? And I even realized so much in my world, and we've always been good at communication and stuff. And now we've taken it even to a better level. But
yeah,
that's how I built my business. I opened my business in 2014. I had never prepped taxes for anybody in my life.
yeah,
And guess what? I was just willing to do whatever I
yeah,
needed to do, right? I responded to people. I responded to people quickly. I got their stuff done fast. And that was really all driven by my own anxiety and trying to make sure, I was doing things well. But like it built me a reputation. And people were happy to refer people to me because,
yeah,
oh, yeah, Paden takes care of people, he communicates. And like, if you just do those things and actually think about giving the customer a good experience, like how important that is. What else are they going to take away but their experience? Focus on that. A whole lot of other problems get a lot smaller.
No, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, just having that fast experience, getting things done, following through with what you tell somebody you're going to do, like
Mhm.
getting those things like set up that way is huge. And I think more people need to spend more time on that.
Yeah. And in today's world with technology, you can build systems that systematize all that, right? Of
Yeah.
just like when I was talking about my AI note taker, it gives all of us tasks at the end of it. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I get off the call with Jeff, and Jeff's supposed to get me X, and Peyton's supposed to do Y. Well, guess what? I get a task in my HubSpot telling me that I need to get Jeff whatever it is. And as long as you're following your tasks and doing them, nothing's just going to be like, oh, well, sorry, Jeff, I forgot about that. I never did that. Or that stuff is just so common.
Yeah. And we've gone through and set up in our CRM, like if we get a lead, like we've got a thing that pops up and it sends you an
Yeah.
email and a
Follow up and
notification
yeah.
and says, contact now, contact now. It's been 5 minutes. And at 10 minutes, it's like,
Speed
it's
the
been 10
lead.
minutes. Yeah, call them now. Like at 15 minutes,
Yeah.
call them right now. And the text gets
Yeah.
bigger and bigger on the notifications and stuff specifically for that. But
Best companies that are growing, Jeff, are like they just have great follow up.
yeah,
Not everybody's ready to buy right now, and they have just great ways to follow up and nurture and follow up and nurture. That leads to a lot more sales.
I would totally agree with you on that. I think that's one of the things that over time, helps people, you build that rapport and you build a relationship with them. And as you're following up with them, eventually, like there's going to be something that you're going to be able to help them
Yeah,
with.
a need's
So,
going to come up, or they're going to have a friend that has a need,
yeah,
and
no,
guess what? They're going to tell them about you.
yeah, no, totally agree. Totally agree. Peyton, this has been a fantastic conversation, man. Tell folks where they can find you if they want to get in touch with you for tax and
Yeah,
wealth planning. Let them
yeah.
know how to get in touch. And we'll also put all that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to talk about taxes and wealth and, kind of your personal situation over there. You can look me up at squirestaxplanning.com. You can book a call with me and we can just kind of discuss your situation a little bit high level. On the podcast and the personal brand side, my podcast is Behind Their Success. We released episode 100 yesterday. So that's super exciting. And
That's
and
awesome.
and really so if you want kind of mindset entrepreneur type content, you can find that at padensquires.com and really just on any social media platform. We're on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook.
Good stuff. Peyton, thanks for jumping in today. Everybody, appreciate you tuning in. Feel free to jump in the comments if you got any questions, and we'll respond as quickly as we can. Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Jeff.